I am Loki the Gamer, I love Magic the Gathering, and welcome to my homemade magic cards based off of Dora the Explorer. Just kidding, it's Civilization 6 as usual. Here we are doing Korea. The 6 cards in the Korea set are 1 legendary land, 2 leaders, 2 unique builds, and 1 card based on the agenda of a leader of Korea. An overview of Korea will involve a whole bunch of science. And of course, according to my equivalency chart, science always equals card draw. Makes sense, drawing happens from your library in Magic. Library equals books, knowledge, science, and the more you know. So there you go, so science and card draw. There will be mentions of improvements, in particularly mines and farms and Silwon, the unique district of Korea. All those types of improvements and builds are considered land auras, sometimes artifacts, but most often, as is the case here, land auras. There will be food. Food will translate to food tokens. There will be culture. Culture, as you see on the chart, is almost always treated as a pacifying effect. The logic, as always, is that your opponent's creatures are in love with your culture. That's how you win a culture game in Civ 6. You generate tourism, no one is at war with you, people are visiting your lands, so they don't attack you. Therefore, in Magic terms, your opponent's creatures are either tapped or their damage is prevented. One way or the other, it's a kind of pacifying effect. And in this case, I gave Korea's culture boost a tapping ability. Science and food will be reliant on improvements, so the card draw and the food tokens that we just mentioned will often be reliant on land auras. More details on that later. And interestingly, Korea is one of the few civs out there that actually have powers that relate to governors. I treated governors as advisors, so the advisor creature type. It's already a creature type that is rather common enough at least in Magic, and of course I created a couple more in order to make sure that Korea had some juicy advisors to use. The color identity of Korea will be, well, blue, obviously, since we're talking about science. Card draw, that is all blue, baby. And white as well, given the structure of the Korean society. The power of Korea in Civ 6 is called 3 Kingdoms. So here's where we talk about land improvements, mines and farms, which are of course treated as land auras in my homemade cards. It says land receive extra science for every adjacent Silwon district, which is again the unique district of Korea, and farms receive +1 food for, again, every adjacent Silwon district. So I had to find a way for the Korean land to grant extra card draw and extra food, but dependent on the presence of land auras. These mines and farms, and even so on, being considered land auras. So let's take a look at my Korea land. It is a modal dual-faced land, the land of Korea, and the ancient name for Korea, Silla. However, it won't take us too long to go over both sides because they are exactly the same. I simply made one side produce blue, and the other side produce white. The 3 Kingdoms ability on either side is exactly the same, so let's read it. Whenever an enchanted land you control is tapped, don't forget, an enchanted land means a land that has received a farm, a mine, or a Silwon, so it is assumed that any land aura is one of those, therefore it meets the requirement of the ability. So whenever an enchanted land you control is tapped, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. So there's your free draw, but it's not free, of course. You have to discard a card. I made sure that the powers of a land were not that overpowered. I know I'm bad at that usually, but I tried here to give a card draw something that costs something. So, when an enchanted land is tapped, you may discard a card. If you do draw a card, there's your science bonus. If you discarded a non-creature, non-land card, create a food token for each aura on that land. So there's your food bonus, and you'll notice that the food bonus scales up with the number of auras on that land. We know there's at least one, obviously, because that whole power triggered because that land was enchanted. So there's at least one, but you might get more than one food if that land happens to have many auras. So this land fits beautifully in one of those decks that I designed that must be heavy on land auras. Something like that will be able to trigger very often and give you lots of card draw, lots of food. So yeah, so many of those decks that I've designed, those commanders, those leaders that I've designed that had powers in Civ 6 that scaled up for the amount of improvements upon the land. Of course, I made those powers depend on land auras, and therefore it is in their best interest to put a whole bunch of them in their deck, really make it a land aura tribal deck, so to speak, and the land of Korea/Scylla would fit amazingly well in such a deck. I'm always reminded of what I came up with for Hammurabi of Babylon, and this happens to fit his colors as well, so Korea/Scylla would be amazing in a deck like Hammurabi's deck. Moving on to the leader of Korea, at least the original one that was first introduced in Civ 6, it is Seondok. Of course, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce those. Do let me know in the comments how silly I actually sound. Her ability is called the Hwarang, and this is the one that deals with governors. So as you'll remember, governors are translated to advisors, so simple creatures that are advisors. You'll see when we get to Suleiman of the Ottoman Empire how I treated governors very differently. Suleiman's private governor is the very last card that I designed for this whole project, and it is not an advisor creature. Let's save that surprise for when we talk about the Ottoman. So let's go back to Seondok. So governors basically give you extra culture and extra science the more promotions they have. So they boost the culture and science output of the city where they are stationed. So I turned that into something that is triggered when you tap advisors. There's Seondok, Queen of Scylla. For 1 blue, 1 white, and 2 generic, you get this rare human noble advisor, so hint hint, she is an advisor, so she can be used to activate her own ability. Her Hwarang ability reads, whenever you draw a card, except the first one you draw in each of your draw steps, you may tap an untapped advisor you control. If you do, tap target creature and draw a card. So there you go, each time you use an advisor, so each time you agree to tap an advisor, that is the equivalent of giving a promotion to a governor. So tap an advisor and get your culture boost, tapping a creature, and draw a card, that's your science boost. But of course, you can't do that willingly just by tapping an advisor, you have to draw a card to trigger that ability. But the result is drawing a card, so of course, after you've done that once, you've just triggered the ability again. If you have another advisor, you can therefore tap it and do it again, which will trigger the ability again, and so on and so forth. So really, as long as you get the ball rolling, as long as you get this chain reaction started, as long as you manage to draw a card, just a card, other than of course the regular card from your draw step, that one doesn't count. Just do something, anything, which blue of course is amazing at, to draw a card, you'll be able to get this chain reaction started, and you can tap, if you wish, all of your advisors to draw a bunch of cards and tap a bunch of creatures. It boils down to that famous wizard, the lady commander, that says all your wizards get to tap to draw a card. I forget her name, but it's roughly like that. Instead of wizards may tap to draw a card, now it's advisors may tap to draw a card, with the exception that you've got to get the ball rolling yourself. You can't just tap to draw. So there's an extra little difficulty, but there's also an extra benefit. Don't forget your culture boost, tapping opposing creatures. That's very powerful. So trickier to trigger than that wizard person lady, but the reward is better because you get to tap a bunch of people. So very neat, and let's not forget that you at least have one advisor. Seondok herself is one. That's it for the original leader of Korea, and now for the one that they added much later into the game. He is Sejong, and his ability is Hangul. When you complete your first technology from a new era, receive double your science per turn as culture. So you get a massive culture, one-time boost each time you enter a new era. So, entering a new era, what is that? That is a concept that does not translate to Magic at all. So I had to once again be creative. I decided to interpret, is that how you say it? Is that how you pronounce it? Intercourse. I decided to intercourse the concept of switching eras into getting a permanent with a mana value that you don't already have. It felt like, hey, here's something new, something you've never had before, a permanent with a new fantastical mana value. That's like a new aura, a brand new toy for you to use, so it felt like the start of a new era, a permanent with a new mana value. Ooh, shiny. And therefore, we ended up with Seonjeon of Joseon for 1 white and 1 blue, so much cheaper than Seondok. You've got this uncommon human noble advisor. Hey, another advisor, more meat for the grinder for Seondok. And he too is 2/2. And there's his Hangul ability. It says, whenever a permanent enters under your control, if that permanent has a mana value different than all other non-land permanents you control, tap up to 2 target creatures for each card you've drawn this turn. So the trigger is that which I've already explained, getting a permanent with a mana value that you don't already have. And the reward, well, if you'll remember, the reward had to be a bunch of culture that was equal to twice your science. So your science, I've treated it as the number of cards you've drawn this turn, science always being equal to card draw. So therefore, if you've drawn a lot of cards, congratulations, you've had a lot of science, you deserve a big culture boost. And your culture boost is indeed twice that, just like the Civ Power says. And the culture boost is, once again, tapping people. So very interesting how both of these leaders are white and blue, and they have tap abilities. White and blue happen to be the 2 best colors for tapping other creatures. A whole ton of triggers for when you tap a creature, do this and do that, such as Hilda of the Icy Crown. I know that a deck like that can be amazing. I built one. So there you go. It's no accident that I made Korea white and blue in order to fit in, to synergize with the existing Magic cards that are all about tapping creatures. So that would be a nasty deck. Would you put Sejong or Seondok or both in the 99 of a Hilda deck? I don't know. I'll ask my girlfriend. She's the one who controls that Hilda deck. I don't get the pleasure of being at the helm of that deck very often. It's her deck. Or would you rather use Sejong or Seondok as your commander and stick Hilda in the 99? And if these homemade cards actually existed, then that choice would actually be somewhat relevant. And we didn't even yet talk about how to ensure that your Sejong trigger actually triggers often. You would conceivably have to build your deck with a balanced number of permanent cards with different mana values, or perhaps do some blinking. Guess what? White and blue is also the best color for blinking, or bouncing, or unsummoning. Basically, you've got options to ensure that his ability triggers as often as possible. And you'll notice, of course, that his ability is enhanced the more cards you've drawn, not to mention that Seondok, of course, needs for a card draw to happen in order for her crazy chain reaction to begin, and therefore it's no accident that I built in a card draw ability in the land of Korea. That land does depend on the land auras, which you may or may not have a lot of in your deck, but if you do, then you can certainly count on it to boost or to trigger your Sejong and or Seondok. Now let's look at the unique unit of Korea. It is a cool field cannon, some kind of thing with a lot of spikes. It looks like something the dwarves would build in a fantasy movie. I don't know, but seems like it's real. The Hwacha. I turned it into an artifact creature construct that costs 4. It's an uncommon card. It's got vigilance, trample, first strike. And because it is cheap to build, it's essentially a cheaper version of the field cannon. Well, I made it so that when it enters, you get a refund. So it's kind of like ramping, but not really. You simply get one of your mana back when it enters. And hey, we were just talking about flickering with Sejong. Well, if you can flicker that, you'll get a mana each time. So another reason to maybe stick that in your deck. It is an improved field cannon, so therefore it has a range attack in Civ 6, and range normally means that it can shoot down things, and therefore I've given most of the range units a reach ability in Magic, but it felt to me like the field cannon was used to punch through things at eye level, not to shoot things down from the air. So I didn't feel like it was ever designed to handle ground-to-air combat. It comes from a time when there was nothing to shoot down from the air, so giving it reach, in this case, it didn't seem relevant or accurate, but the Vigilance Trample First Strike does seem to fit the bill. And the First Strike, of course, is a nice way of counterbalancing its one defense. So yes, it's easy to kill with some direct damage, but in combat, it's pretty tricky because it's got 4 power, and that First Strike will come in handy to keep it from dying. So that's the unique unit of Korea. Now, it's got an infrastructure, the one that we talked about, the Seo-1. It is an upgraded, a better campus. Better? Yes, there's no doubt that it's a better campus. Just look at how quickly Korea always advances in science when you play against it as the AI. Or if you play Korea, you should really be able to steamroll everyone else in science, and the Seo-1 is a major reason for that. But you just have to make sure that you don't actually trigger the one disadvantage that the Seo-1 has. So it must be built on hills in the game, but I chose to ignore that. If I made it a land aura that must only be on mountains, well, guess what? Korea, the commander deck, wouldn't be able to use that in its own deck, since you do not have mountains in a blue-white deck. So I ignored that, but it must be alone. It strives to be alone, adjacent to no other districts. If it is, it starts to lose science boosts, because its science boost is amazing. I think it's +4 science, it's something huge, and that's how Korea just runs away with the scientific lead all the time. But if you stick another district near it, that boost goes down and down and down. So yes, you really want to try to make sure that you stick it alone. And the concept of being alone made me think of one thing, made me think of Exalted. Now, normally I reserve Exalted for amenities, something that deals with luxuries or amenities. People are happy, people are exalted. So I've used that equivalence before in civs that dealt with being super happy amenities. It made sense to translate that to the exalted keyword. I love reusing magic keywords. If you've been a long-time listener of this project, then you know that about me. And in this case, exalted doesn't mean happy, it just means alone. Alone by itself, so therefore, you will see the Seo-1 actually makes use of exalted. And of course, expect it to have some card draw as well. Here is the aura. It's 3 mana, 1 blue, 2 generic, common, enchant land, and of course, again, it's not enchant mountain. And when Seo-1 enters, draw 2 cards. So there you go. Right there and then, it's 2 cards for 3 mana. That's perfectly normal and average for a blue spell, a typical blue spell. Of course, usually blue spells are instant sorceries, and they allow you to draw just like that. This one, it's an aura that simply has an ETB, draw 2 cards. And of course, if you can bounce it, you can draw 2 cards again and again and again. I would put that in my Yorion Sky Nomad deck for sure. And then Enchanted Land has tap, target creature gains exalted until end of turn. So what good is it to tap a land so you essentially lose the potential mana that land could have given you, just to give exalted to 1 creature? Not much. But really, it's not meant to make a huge difference. The real power of that card is drawing 2 cards when it enters, really. The Exalted is a nice little bonus, And also the fact that it's a land aura, it plays right into the strategy of the land of Korea/Scylla that we saw at the beginning. So there you go, if you do want to load your deck with auras in a Korean deck or a Babylon deck like we've said often, then this one might interest you. So you get some easy draw, and those draws of course could trigger either of your commanders, and hey, the Exalted is a cute, nice little bonus, which I doubt would make a big difference, but yeah, it has other purposes. The point being, an aura is its own purpose, because I made so many cards, so many usable potential commanders care about auras, or other cards that care about auras. I think I remember in the Australian pack there was something that cared about auras. Many things that I created scaled up the more auras you had. Babylon is one of them, but certainly not the only one. So there you go. We now have one card left to look at, and it is the one based off of, I believe that is Seonduk's agenda or Sejong. I forget which one is it. Let's take a look. And oh, lovely, internet's down, so I can't check. So either one of them, they have an agenda called Chumseongdae. And yeah, that determines what they like or dislike. I do think that it's Seonduk. So obviously she likes opponents that have high science, like her, and she dislikes the curmudgeon, the barbarians, the uncouth players who have low science. And therefore, I made a card that doesn't penalize anyone, really. So that's one of the rare agenda cards that I created that doesn't penalize someone who disrespects the leader's agenda, but it does reward everyone for behaving like the leader. In this case, for drawing many cards. And it also plays into the concept of an enchantment-heavy deck, so maybe an Enchantress-type deck would, once again, like a card like that. For 3 mana, 2 blue and a white, it's a sorcery uncommon that reads, whenever a player draws a card this turn, they may search their library for an enchantment card, reveal it, put it in their hand, then shuffle. So there you go, so you play that, and now for the rest of the turn, everyone and anyone, including you of course, gets to tutor a free enchantment anytime they draw a card. And since I'm especially thinking of Seonduk, with Seonduk your card draws are all but free. You just need to find a way to trigger that first card draw, and then all of the rest are free. You just need to tap advisors. Then you might end up tutoring a whole bunch of enchantments, so that spell could be quite nice if you've got a heavy card draw effect planned. Play this just before and go nuts with the enchantment tutoring. Of course, you do run the risk that your opponents might take advantage of that and, you know, follow suit, but what are the odds that they have some card draw effects lined up, usable, on deck at the ready right now? And also, do they even have a lot of enchantments in their deck? Maybe they do have some cool card draw effects and then they can take advantage of the huge opportunity you just gave them. But if they run a deck that has very few or no enchantments at all, then tutoring enchantments, tutoring something that doesn't exist, won't help them. So I think it's fair to assume that this, when played correctly, it should almost always be useful to you and practically no one else. So there you go, that is the Chumseongdae. Why did I insist on saying that again when I know that it was obviously wrong? And that concludes the Korean set. What do you think? So if you do have a Hilda deck, are you excited by the prospect of these two potential cards in your 99? Or quite the opposite, maybe you wish that these guys existed, you would make either one of them as your commander, stick the other in your 99, and then use someone like Hilda also in your 99, with a whole bunch of tap triggers. Or so is that the direction in which you would take this deck? Or would you rather go the direction of the land auras, use the concept of the land of Korea and everything else I've created for this set that focused on land auras and land auras from other sets that I've created? Basically, would you make these into land aura heavy decks, or would you save those for other commanders that care more about land auras? So many ways of handling this. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about it. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you again for more Dora the Explorer cards.